Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, do you ever worry? It seems people are worrying even more and more in these days. And there seems to be something very strange about worrying, which is people seem to think that it benefits them. They're doing something when they're worrying, and not necessarily true at all. I am very, very happy to introduce to you my guest, Dr. Jennifer Abel, who is a clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety disorders and worry, and the author of a couple of books, and the latest she has out is a delightful card deck called Melt, Worry, and Relax, and it's got mindfulness and thinking and doing and relaxing, all different color cards so that you know which to turn to when. Now that's quite a strategy in and of itself, isn't it, Jennifer?
It is.
Well, I don't know who designed these cards, Jennifer, but they're beautiful and very easy to read, very upbeat and perky. And I know you specialize in anxiety disorders and this common garden variety that everyone has, it seems, generalized anxiety disorder. What makes anxiety so common these days, would you say?
I think that everybody is anxious to get ahead. They're worried about loved ones. They're worried about their work performance. I think one of the things that adds a great deal to our worries that we didn't have several years ago is media, because our ancestors would only hear about the traumas that are going on in their neighboring towns or their towns. Now we hear about things all over the world, and because of automatic weapons and because of transportation, that like automobiles, there are a lot more sudden things that can happen that can turn a person's world upside down in a moment. And even if none of that has ever happened to you, we see it on the news, and we hear about it from friends of friends.
So would that be called like vicarious stimuli, something like that?
Yeah, I just think that when we hear about something horrible that has happened to someone on the news, or we've heard about it from a friend of a friend, we often think, well, what if that happened to me? What if that happened to someone in my family? And oftentimes, as you said, worrying doesn't control things, and oftentimes people worry to have a false sense of control. And what we know is that it actually does the exact opposite, that people feel more out of control when they worry excessively. And the reason that a lot of times people are worrying is they're trying to be able to control things. They're trying to have a better outcome. They're trying to problem solve. But we know that people who have generalized anxiety, we've known for many years, don't tend to problem solve very well. And we've found that these folks are just as good at problem solving, but that their worrying and anxiety actually prevents them from problem solving. And most of us have experienced this. Most of us have had something that we've been worried about or anxious about, and we come up with a solution when we stop worrying about it, or when we're in a relaxed situation. That's when the best ideas come to mind. So it's actually beneficial to be able to relax and be mindful and let go of these concerns it will actually help us to come up with better solutions.
And this is counterintuitive, would you say, Dr. Jennifer Abel? Because when I'm thinking of my own patients, it's almost as if they need the worry to galvanize themselves into action, to put the problem on their radar screen. They report to me that worrying helps them in one way. I definitely hear what you're saying. And we often know that the things to do right do seem counterintuitive.
Yes, and one of the things that I recommend for that, the thing that I think works the best for that, is that you're absolutely right. We want to give due diligence. We want to be responsible. We want to take action to try to improve our lives. So what I encourage people to do is a couple of things, but one is to try to problem solve instead of worry, and to give yourself a finite time to do that. So a wonderful time to do that is on the commute, because most of us don't have time to set aside 20 minutes to sit down and think about our problems and try to come up with solutions. What we know is that when we worry all day long, we don't come up with those solutions. It doesn't seem to be effective. It only causes us to have muscle tension and headaches and feeling keyed up and on edge. But if we can say, I am going to think about this problem on my commute into work, and I'm going to try to problem solve it on my commute into work, and then use various other strategies throughout the day to let go, including, I'll think about this on my commute tomorrow morning.
To pull a Scarlett O'Hara. Right? I'll think about this tomorrow.
Exactly.
Wow. Scarlett
She had the right idea, didn't she?
She had the right idea. Oh, that's so interesting. So, I'm thinking when you say that, give it a finite time, and I love the idea of problem solving when you're commuting. I'm thinking about Andrew Carnegie's book. It was already must have been 70 years ago. Stop worrying and start living. And he said the exact same thing, that you seclude your worrying time in a particular time, a particular place, and you give it a finite time. It makes so much sense, and I think it's doable for people. I think it would give them enough of an outlet to say, well, I am going to worry, but I'm going to transmute that into problem solving. Yeah. And how do you distinguish between problem solving while you're driving and ruminating?
Well, ruminating would be something like, I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. What if I'm making too many mistakes? I'm worried about my job performance. I'm worried that my boss doesn't respect my work. None of those are productive. Those are all just worrying and ruminating. Whereas I'm going to go talk to my boss about my performance. I'm going to ask when my performance review is due. I'm going to ask if there's anything that I can do to improve my job. Or maybe even think about, this is an area that I could make stronger. I'm going to study this area in my spare time. Something like that. Right.
So, I'm thinking of that old acronym, SWOT. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so what you're asking of people is to translate those threats into opportunities and really just see, as you say, what's doable, what's the I can statement. And then let's suppose somebody translates that, and they say, I'm going to talk to my boss. And what if they then say, I'm afraid to do that? So I'm going to put it off. I'm going to procrastinate.
Well, some people do procrastinate, and kind of unrelated to what we're talking about is that procrastination often works best when people actually finally do it because there's evidence that we marinate on these things to procrastinate. When we procrastinate, it's marinating, and then we come up with better ideas. But I might, if I had a client who was concerned about that, I might ask them to prepare for the meeting, to ask some questions, to role play it, to get comfortable. For me to role play being the boss. So if someone's not in therapy, they could have a family member role play being their boss, so they could practice it to get more comfortable with it.
Yes. Yes, and the behavioral modification piece, and you are a cognitive behavioral therapist, and change your thinking, change your feelings, change your behavior, and it works.
It does.
And the way you portray the example, to get support. It's with support to share some of your feelings. Would you say that?
Would I say that?
To share your feelings?
I definitely think it's helpful to share feelings. When people hold their emotions in, they actually don't do as well in therapy.
Yes.
They don't do as well with cognitive behavioral therapy when they hold their emotions in and avoid emotional processing, avoiding talking about something and crying, talking about something and getting angry. If they hold their emotions in, they don't tend to do as well. And when I was working at Penn State, we noted that people would often have a turnaround, if you will, after they finally cried about a situation, or they got angry about something that happened to them in grade school, that they would let that emotion out, and then suddenly the cognitive behavioral therapy starts to work, and they start to feel better.
Yes. So what do you make of that? What's behind that? Being able to think more clearly after you have emotionally discharged.
Yeah, I just know that it's sometimes necessary. Most people do just fine with cognitive behavioral therapy without having to do some of that deeper work. 85 to 90% of people no longer have generalized anxiety after using a lot of the concepts that are in my Melt, Worry, and Relax card deck. They find that they're not worrying as much and that they're not as depressed, even without having to do the emotional processing.
Isn't that interesting that you don't necessarily have to do emotional processing? So how would you define depression?
Depression depends on who is depressed. It would either be feeling down, sad, and blue, or having no interest in usual activities and getting no pleasure from those activities. One of the two, or sometimes both, along with a number of symptoms like difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping too much, finding that you're avoiding things like avoiding socializing, because you're not motivated to do things, lack of motivation.
So those two, either you're down and sad or you're not interested, are they two different names for those two different kinds of depression?
No, they're still, I mean, according to the DSM, they're still major depression. Just that men, for instance, they're more likely to have a disinterest in things and just not get pleasure out of things. And they often say, well, I'm not depressed. I'm not weepy. I'm not sad.
Right.
Whereas women are more likely to cry and feel down and feel sad and hopeless.
Oh, that's interesting. So there's more of, I don't know, perhaps a denial in men of the sad feelings, and just a kind of a numbing. It's